When you hear the name Albert Einstein, what comes to mind? Probably the crazy hair, right? And maybe E equals MC squared. But what if I told you he's not just some guy from a history book? He is, in a very real way, the architect of the world you're in right now. And to prove it, let me ask you something.
Okay, seriously, think about this. You pull out your phone, you see that little blue dot that tells you exactly where you are. It's magical, right? It guides you through a city you've never been to. But have you ever stopped to wonder, how does it actually work? What's the science behind that everyday magic?
Well, it's pretty wild, but the answer is it uses the minds of Albert Einstein. Yep, that's right. The GPS in your phone, in your car, everywhere. It only works because of theories a guy dreamed up over 100 years ago. It's this straight line from his brain to the tech in your hand.
So let's dive into that. Let's talk about Einstein in your pockets.
Okay, so here's the deal. It all comes down to his theory of relativity. You've got these GPS satellites whipping around the Earth at incredible speeds, and they're way up high, so gravity is weaker for them than it is for us down here. Now, Einstein's theories predicted something crazy. Both of those things, speed and gravity, actually change how time flows. So for those satellites, time literally ticks just a tiny bit faster. And if the GPS system didn't use his equations to correct for that, well, your location would be off by miles within a single day. It would be totally useless.
So who was this guy? The man whose ideas are literally navigating our lives. The real story, it turns out, is way cooler than the myth. So we've all heard it, right? Einstein failed math. It's a great story for anyone who struggled in school, but it's a total myth. He wasn't a bad student at all. He was a brilliant one, who just couldn't stand the super rigid, just memorize this system. He was a rebel, an independent thinker. And that entrance exam he supposedly failed, yeah, he actually crushed the math and physics parts.
And get this, after school, he actually had a tough time finding a teaching job. So he ends up in this, kind of boring job at the Swiss patent office. But it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to him. It gave him a paycheck, sure, but it also gave him time to think. And it was right there, at his desk, that he started running these thought experiments in his head that were about to change, well, everything.
And I'm not kidding when I say change everything. He didn't just tweak the existing rules of physics. He basically took the rulebook, tossed it in the fire, and wrote a brand new one from scratch.
It all happened in one single year, 1905. It's called his miracle year for a reason. He published 4 papers that completely flipped science on its head.
Okay, so the first big one was special relativity. For hundreds of years, everyone just knew that space and time were absolute, like a rigid stage where everything happens. Einstein said, nope. He said the only thing that's truly constant is the speed of light. And here's the crazy part. For that to be true, space and time themselves have to be flexible. They can stretch and shrink. This is that wild idea that time literally slows down the faster you move, which brings us right back to this GPS satellite.
Then, almost as a side note in another paper, he drops the most famous equation in history, E equals mc squared. But it's so much more than a formula. It's this beautiful, simple statement that mass and energy are basically the same thing. They're interchangeable. It meant that a tiny, tiny speck of matter holds an unbelievable amount of locked-up energy, an idea that, well, would go on to define the entire century.
And believe it or not, he wasn't done. For another 10 years, he wrestled with how to fit gravity into this new picture. Finally, in 1915, he unveiled his masterpiece, General Relativity. And he said that gravity, it isn't a force at all. It's not some mysterious thing pulling you down. It's just the shape of space-time itself.
The best way to get your head around this is the classic trampoline analogy. Imagine space-time is a big, stretched-out trampoline. Now, put a heavy bowling ball, that's the sun, in the middle. What happens? It creates a big dip, a curve in the fabric. Now roll a little marble, that's the Earth, nearby. It's not being pulled by the bowling ball, it's just following the curve. That's gravity. It's not a force, it's just geometry. But Einstein's story goes way beyond physics. It's also this incredibly intense human drama, where his own brilliant ideas backed him into a terrible, impossible corner. So, Einstein was Jewish, and as Hitler rose to power, he had to flee Nazi Germany. A few years later, in 1939, he's faced with an absolute nightmare scenario. The fear that the Nazis could use his own equation, E equals mc squared, to build an atomic bomb. So this man, who was a passionate, lifelong pacifist, was persuaded to sign a letter to President Roosevelt, a letter that said, essentially, you have to build this weapon before they do. And that letter, it was one of the key things that kicked off the Manhattan Project.
He lived to see the absolute horror of the bombs dropped on Japan, the power that his ideas had helped unleash. He would later say that signing that letter was the one great mistake of his life. He spent the rest of his days haunted by it, fighting for nuclear disarmament.
So when you put it all together, the science, the man, the history, you start to see it. His fingerprints are absolutely everywhere in the world we live in today. Let's just break it down. Because he figured out that space and time are dynamic, relativity, you have GPS on your phone. Because he discovered E equals MC squared, we have both nuclear power and life-saving medical tech like PET scans. And because of that one fateful letter he signed, he helped kickstart the nuclear age that has shaped our world ever since.
And you know what? It doesn't even stop there. His early work on light also helped kick off the whole field of quantum theory. And quantum mechanics, that's the science behind, well, pretty much all modern electronics. Computers, smartphones, lasers, solar panels. Without his foundational work, our digital world just wouldn't exist. The scale of his influence is just mind-blowing.
So in the end, Einstein did more than just discover new things. He gave us a completely new rulebook for the universe, a new way to see reality, from the biggest galaxies down to the tiniest atoms. He changed everything. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What fundamental rule about our universe is just sitting there, waiting for the next Einstein to come along and rewrite it all over again?